Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have author and comedian Jeff Allen. Jeff, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, that's great. I get this feeling of deja vu. You ever have that? I think I have this. Yeah.
Jeff, I love to start the podcast with kind of a macro perspective. And so I'm curious, how would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. Boy, you know what? That's a great question. I've been doing this since I was 22 years old. So I gave my life to Christ when I was almost 40. So I was about 18 years deep into doing stand-up comedy, and it's an interesting thing as we were putting the book together. The book is written from the ages of 30 to 38, from the time I got married to the time I gave my life to Jesus, and in those years of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. And the reason I wanted really to write it was for today's millennial who's in those ages where I wouldn't have used the word lost, but in hindsight, I look back, I was lost. I had no sense of direction at all. So if calling is direction, I really just want to make people laugh. I mean, it's funny. I never looked at it as a ministry until I came out of COVID.
Wow.
When I started doing shows after COVID, I had to have men my age at my shows coming over to me. Their wives would be going to the bathroom, and they would start telling me this is the first time in over a year they've heard their wife laugh. And I fell in love with my wife because of her laugh. She was a smoker 37 years ago, and smokers have a great laugh. I mean, when you cannot get oxygen into your lungs, that's actually music. The gasping, gagging, wheezing that everybody's annoyed by is a symphony of joy to a comic. So, I felt so to imagine going a year without hearing my wife laugh would be heartbreaking. So I kind of looked at what I did differently after that. It's like, okay, maybe this is God's calling on my life. Maybe, just to make people laugh is enough. The book is, again, written from a time in our life when we were definitely lost from any semblance of or any connection to the divine, that's for sure. And I can certainly speak to a life disconnected because I don't ever want to go back there. I mean, anybody who's walked with Jesus, I don't speak for anybody, but I can tell you this: there were times where I just said, "This is exhausting." Trying to live up to a standard, and I had I call them seed planter. These are people God puts into my life for a brief moment. And I was talking after a show one night about I'm just exhausted. I just basically saying I'm not good enough. It's interesting. I wasn't raised in a church, but it took me about 5 years to start becoming a legalist as a believer, And he finally said to me, "So what you're saying to me is God's grace isn't enough for you." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, if you think you got to earn or be, then you're not in Christ, And it took me a while to chew on that on the way back to the hotel, but he was right. I started performing and not well enough and not good enough. And it was one of those where I said, all right, I just can't do this. I think it was Chesterton that said, it wasn't that Christianity was tried and found wanting. It was tried, found too difficult, and abandoned. And the reason it's difficult is because we have a hard time. We're a performance-based culture. Everything is about performance. What do you do? First question people ask, what do you do? Be great if they said, who are you in? Who's the Lord of your life? or what's the Lord of your life? And that would be a great conversation starter, because it's like, oh, I never looked at it. I don't know, money. I want a lot of money. So money's the Lord of my life, or whatever. And I just started going through the program Pure Desire again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I can't believe I got away from it for 3 or 4 years. It's something that I think from here on out will be part of my daily life, or certainly a part of every year I do. I'll go through that 7 pillars, because it's just a constant reminder of who is the Lord of your life, and everything else seems to be better because of that. The anxiety isn't as much, and all the other stuff that comes with a performance.
One of the interesting things about your comedy and kind of the work that you do, your ministry, if I can call it that, is that it's what I refer to as sneaky Jesus. So it's not like overtly Jesus, like you're not out there like Bible thumping, but you're very clearly giving biblical thoughts to everyday situations. And I'm always curious about people's creative processes. I believe that we serve a creative God.
Yeah.
How do you come up with the comedy, the bits? I recently watched one of your YouTube videos about the difference between being a 2.0 and a 4.0, and you just weren't exactly sure how to land it. And as somebody who communicates regularly, I was dying, and also I was like, this is fascinating. So take me behind the curtain a little bit on what do you do to create content?
Well, it's interesting. I'll give you an example of the latest one. My wife and I were on vacation in Montana. Our grandkids live up there. So I had a show in Spokane, which is 3 hours from Missoula. So I said to Tammy, hey, why don't you come up to me to Spokane? She has rules about my comedy of her attending. It has to be 5 days in one place and an ocean nearby. And those are limits, how many times she comes out with me. So anyway, I told her, I go, look, I got one day in Spokane. I said, I'll tell you what, I will take you over to Coeur d'Alene, which is like an hour from where I'm working, and we'll get a room at the resort there, and it'll be a nice couple of days, and then we'll go to Missoula and visit the grandkids. Well, that's all she needed to hear. She was going to see the grandkids. So anyway, we were in the car for a lot. We drove a lot, and at one point I looked at her. We were about 3 days into our trip, and I said, did you ever notice that every one of our conversations anymore turned into a game of charades? And she says, what are you talking about? I go, she started with, I saw that guy you worked with in New York on TV the other day. And I go, what guy? She goes, that guy. You know the guy. I go, no, I don't know the guy. Was it New York City I worked? He goes, I don't know. But Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, those are the only places I work in New York. She goes, Jeff, I don't know. I said, well, what do he look like? Well, he was a white guy. I go, well, that narrows it down. I go, tall, short. She goes, well, your height. So 6 foot? No, he wasn't that tall. And he's not my height. And then eventually we get to no conclusion, and she just drifts off and looks out the window. And I that's when it hit me. I said, together, we have a good brain. We just have to work it out together. I mean, we can't remember a darn thing. And I'll start the same thing. Hey, let's grab a bite at that place. It was like in California. What was the name of that place we ate in California? And she goes, what place? And I go, I can't remember the name of the place. Was it seafood? No, it wasn't seafood. It was, and then we start the whole thing all over again, And so that's the newest one. And to make comedy out of it, first of all, the comments I'm getting afterwards from people are saying, that's us. That's exactly our life is. And then later on in the show, I recall it by, I just out of nowhere she wakes up one night and starts screaming at me, Jeff Jenna, Jeff Jenna, Jeff Jenna. I go, what about him? She goes, that's the guy in New York. I couldn't remember his name. And so that's where the comedy came in. I wanted to recall it. And the great thing about that particular thing is if I get lost and I don't know where I'm going, which happens a lot lately, I can just throw that in. I can just and that just gets a laugh when there was a lull. So
You had so much time doing comedy before you got sober, and then a lot more time since sobriety, and really you're kind of that catalyst moment with the Lord in the middle of it.
yes.
What's the difference in comedy with alcohol and cocaine and without?
Well, I can tell you, it's a heart thing. It's an anger thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a heart thing. You know, I wrote in the book because this was so profound to me. I was talking to a guy after a show, and he said he had worked with somebody relatively famous out in the West Coast, and the relatively famous guy bombed,
Hmm.
and the guy I was talking to did really well. So they're riding back to the hotel, and the really famous guy says, "Yeah, that was a good show." And the guy thought he was talking about him. He goes, "Thank you." He goes, "No, I'm not talking about your show. I'm talking about mine." And the guy says, "With all due respect, you bombed." He goes, "Nah, not really." He said, "When I looked out into the audience, the people that were laughing were people I would handpick to be in my show."
Wow.
So I was connecting with the people I thought I wanted to connect with. So there came a point, I remember leaving a show in North Carolina somewhere, Charlotte, I think it was. And I realized the people coming up to me were men with wife beater shirts and tats and drunk, and "You must be married to the same bitch I'm married to," and
Hmm.
that kind of thing, you know. And it was not a good feeling. I'd go back to my room and sit and go, "These are not guys I want to have a drink with. They're not people I want to know." And I think it was the second time Tammy saw me in Arizona where she left in tears that
Wow.
I really connected that I needed to, you know, I had women club owners that wouldn't hire me because of the way I talked about her. And the only thing that changed was my heart. I mean, I didn't change the material. I really didn't. And the things that I said, um, you know, it, there was a different attitude that
Hmm.
shone through. And my prayer every night, it was kind of what the prayer we led with today is. You know, my prayer is when I walk out on that stage, don't let them see me. Let them see you. Let them hear you. Let them feel you, you know. And that's the only thing I can say is and I always check. You know, it's interesting. I have such, because especially with cancel culture the way it is today.
Yeah.
I had a woman come over to me about a joke I did about an effeminate flight attendant, a male. You know, "Hi everybody, I'm Russell." You know, and she said, "What do you think parents of gay children would feel about that?" And I said, "Well, I hope they laugh." And she says, "Well, I didn't think it was funny." And I said, "Well, you're entitled to that. That's kind of what comedy is. It's a pretty subjective thing." But I said, "If you could tell me where there was any malice in what I did, I'll take it out. I'll drop it tomorrow." But I said, "You're going to have a hard time because there was nothing malicious about it. It was an impersonation of a flight attendant. And if you think an effeminate male flight attendant is a stretch, you don't fly." So, and I have a 3 rule. If I get 3 emails on something, then maybe I'll look at it. But I remember when I first started working churches, I called a friend of mine up, and he was a manager of some really big, famous Christian artists. And I said, "I'm concerned because I've never worked at church before. I don't want to offend anybody." And he said, "If you're in a church and your lips are moving and words are escaping from your lips, you're going to offend somebody."
Preach.
So he said, "At the end of the night, you got to look in the mirror and ask yourself, you know, um,
Hmm.
if your intent." So I don't never satirize the church. People asked why I never, you know, I said, "Because I'm not versed enough in church
Yeah.
to know." I said, "To do good satire, you have to at least be conscious of whose toes you're trying to step on." You know, and I wasn't aware of it. I didn't know where the sacred cows were. I don't know. I remember the first time some woman came over to me. I finally used a verse in my show from the Bible, then drew some comedy from the verse. And a woman comes over to me after the show and she says, "I almost didn't know what you were talking about. We only read the King James Version in our house." See, you laugh, but I didn't know anything about it. So the guy that hired me to perform, I told him the story, and he goes, "Oh my Lord, I thought we weeded those people out years ago." Again, I don't know anything about it. That's how ignorant I am. I don't know that. I was the first Bible I was sent was NIV,
Yeah.
and that's the one I predominantly use. I started reading. I think the NSB, because a pastor I listened to online, Tommy Nelson out of Denton, seemed to, or yeah, maybe it was ASB. It's one of whatever Bible he uses. I just, because I listened to him so many times, I just wanted to read what he was reading instead of, the differences in the thing. But I didn't know there was a thing with the King James. I thought it was kind of odd that you would think Jesus, who spoke Aramaic, would speak that way. But I don't know. Whatever works for
I,
you, man.
I'm, I'm I love the vulnerability of the book. I think you did a beautiful job of. Um, I can hear after watching some of your videos, I can hear your humor in the writing, and hear your tone and your dialect. I'm curious about the creative differences. What was it like for you to write a book after doing the short kind of, stand up's got a little bit more bite to it, and this is more like I always say that writing a book's like birthing a baby, and so, talk to me about the differences from your perspective.
Well, that's astute for you to pick up on that because comedy is about brevity. It's about taking out words and getting to the point. And especially, now my audience, they're a little older, and church people, that was the gift of working churches. Churches are used to listening to someone speak for 45 minutes without heckling them. I mean, I've never seen a
Yeah.
pastor heckle in the middle of a sermon. So it was,
Only once. It's
I
only happened to
learned,
me once. They got up and left.
I cut my chops in clubs, and believe me, if you didn't get them in 30 seconds, they would let you know. So I learned to get to the point, and writing a book, it would have been 17 pages if I wrote it for stand up. you know, this happened, this happened, this happened, and now this is where we're at. And I had to get an editor. I hired an editor to help me. Otherwise, it would have been 400 pages probably. I said, you just pick out to me what you feel will be relevant to a reader. I'm too connected to all of it. It's personal. And that's what was hard. I started probably 10 years ago. My wife who's much more astute than I am, pointed out that, did you know that your faith-based videos outview your comedy videos almost 20 to 1?
Wow.
And I didn't know that. She said, yeah, the people are more interested in what you have to say about your faith. So you should write a book. And that's what started the whole process. And it was a contention with me because I'm not a writer. I don't really like writing. That probably brings me back to my high school days when I had English teachers, mock me in class, not because of what I wrote, but because of my laziness
Mm.
and procrastination. So anyway, it was Salem Media saw me at a NRB conference. I did some comedy, and somebody from their office went online and saw my testimony on YouTube and said, do you have a book around that? And I said, funny you should bring that up. My wife keeps picking at that scab. And so anyway, the timing, I don't know. And it's funny because I had told my wife recently, I said, do you realize that if this book had come out 4 or 5 years ago, it would have just laid flat because I had no platform. I had really, I was working, but I would have been just selling them at my shows. And because of Dry Bar, and they're exposing me to the internet in ways that, to the masses, instead of 500 Facebook followers, I got 500,000, and again, you look back and you go, it's funny, God's timing. And I also got a little more ambitious when a publisher reached out. And so that was done, basically. I mean, you don't have to shop it.
Yeah.
And so I just started kind of putting, and then the last draft I gave to Tammy. And I said, you need to read this and be okay, because this is my version of us in that time period. And shared some pretty personal stuff. It was interesting, her insights, when we talked about her affair in California. She took the word affair out. She said, it wasn't an affair. I go, what do you mean? She goes, an affair would give the reader the belief there was something romantic about it. It wasn't romantic at all. I just wanted somebody to be nice to me. You weren't.
Yeah.
And then things got down a path. She goes, I regret. One of the other things that she shared that I didn't even really know about, I think she casually mentioned it once, but we were at a Bill Gaither event, and she was bald from chemo. And little old well-meaning ladies, God bless them, would come over and go, what sin do you think you committed that God would strike you with cancer? You know? And I said, you waited 20 years to tell me this. You know? And she says, well, I know you. You would have leaped over the table and started choking old women. So I go, well, maybe not that, but I certainly would have gotten in her face about it and said, you need to point out what part of grace and forgiveness and why Jesus went to the cross for me, that you would think this. I said this, cancer is part of the fallen world, just like lust. And to me, that's my cancer, that I deal with. So, and alcohol, drugs. It's funny. I made fun of the peanut allergies. You can't even get a pack of peanuts now because some little Joey 8 rows back will get some dust on his nostril and drop dead on us. And I got an email from somebody that said, I have a peanut allergy. You shouldn't be. I said, I have an alcohol allergy. I drink it. I wake up naked next to dumpsters. So, if you can't mock your own allergies, then you're a victim, I guess. I don't know. And I said, I'm not taking it out. So, don't watch me because you think I'm being mean and malicious. I said, it's bad enough. All you get is peanuts on a plane. Now you can't even get that. I remember a time when you got a full meal.
Yeah. Do you what did you learn about God in the process? Because this kind of writing, when you go this deep and this personal, and it's not just and I want to encourage everyone to pick up the book, because it's not just your story, but it's really a look at all of our stories if we choose to use it as such, right? And you talk a little bit about expectations and about where you grew up and kind of that tough relationship with your dad, and there's so much there. It's got layers and layers. What did you learn about God in the writing process?
Well, these are great questions. It's funny. I've done 5 interviews now, and these are some great questions.
Thank you.
You're making me think. I mean, I most of it's just what was with you and the gerbil.
I just like to follow my curiosity.
I love the gerbil story. By the way.
Well, now you're gonna have to tell it.
That's why it's in there.
Answer this question first, and then go there.
Okay. God. I couldn't have done it. It was a painful look, but also exhilarating to realize. Again, it starts out with that. You get so far down your journey. The way I look at my walk with Christ was, I had this honeymoon period, this euphoria, where I just wanted to share it with everybody. I mean, it was like this most amazing thing, and then life got hard. I mean, Tammy got cancer. We had, life got hard. And then I'm 4 or 5 years into this, and I'm finding myself doing and saying things that are unbecoming of the man I want to be. And I feel like nothing's changed. That's the voice the enemy gives us. You're the same. Nothing's going to change. Had an argument with Tammy one day, and she said that. She goes, you're just like you were 10 years ago. That cut me like a knife.
Yeah.
And anyway, you realize that honeymoon period is Scott Peck wrote in his book that true love doesn't exist without conflict. There's no such thing as a truly loving, conflict-free relationship. And all that euphoria that you experienced early in your relationships was an illusion put there by God to keep the species going. Without that euphoria and all of that, the attraction, you wouldn't hook up, you wouldn't breed, so you have that, but then conflict enters, and then now you have a chance to experience true and genuine love. So all these things that happen in a fallen world is our conflict with our loving Creator. And you either embrace it as it's just part of a fallen world. And then when you get to heaven, you can ask, why'd you leave it this way? You know, but in the meantime, it's not my universe. So I learned that. I learned that everything we went through ultimately led us to Christ. And what's more important than anything was, had I experienced Jesus day one from the time I got sober in recovery, I would have never had the 7 years that I lived without him. Because the thought of going back to that life and that man, it got me through whatever struggle I was having with my nature at the time.
Yeah.
And the gerbil was part of that. So nice segue.
And that is it. You nailed that segue.
Yeah, I know. I
I was like,
thought,
I don't
what
know
is
how I'm
it
going to get to the
to
gerbil story. I guess I'm just going to jump right there. But you did all the
lead
work
into the
for me.
gerbil? But that was, again, I always tell audiences, imagine being married to me. You know, we're losing our house at this time. I mean, I'm 2 months behind on the mortgage. We just had a car repossessed. I'm moping around. I'm thinking of getting out of comedy, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no skills. So I'm looking at the kids' gerbil in the bedroom one day, just like for an hour. I mean, an hour, just sitting there, in a chair, looking at it like it's a TV. And Tammy's walked by 5 or 6 times at this point, and she finally goes, "What's with you and the gerbil?" you know. And I said, "Look at it." She goes, "It's a gerbil, Jeff." I go, "No, but it gets sticks on one side of the crate, and then they bring them over to the other side, stack them up, and then they'll sit there for a while, and then he'll spin a wheel, maybe entertain himself, and then he'll start the stick thing again, going to the other side, you know." She said, "So what?" I go, "Well, I begin to project my life. That's it. We buy a few things, they wear out, we take them to the landfill. We're always buying things. Those are our sticks. If I'm lucky, I get a sitcom deal or movie deal. We make a ton of money and we get really nice sticks, but they always get taken away and put into a landfill.
Mm.
Our wheel is Vegas for you and me, maybe Disneyland with the kids or something, but we find ways to distract ourselves and entertain ourselves. But really, all it is about is gathering and changing sticks. And if this is my life for the next 20 years, babe, I'm checking out." And she looked at me and said, "You checked out years ago. This isn't a first." But it was so profound to me because we were losing everything and I didn't care and I couldn't understand why. But that's why I didn't care. So imagine the first Bible verse you hear come out of a pastor's mouth is Ecclesiastes 1:1. Meaningless, meaningless, all in life is meaningless.
Hmm.
My heart just leapt. That was such a deep, profound truth to me. And I thought, if that's the first time I ever really cracked the Bible, I opened it occasionally in a hotel room, the Gideons, and threw it back in the drawer and never got anything out of it. But that hit me. And then you go down further down into chapter 1, and Solomon writes 3,000 years ago, the eyes never get enough of seeing, the ears never get enough of hearing. And there I'm looking at my video library and my music library. And I'm thinking, he's right about that too. Doesn't matter, buy the next thing, And basically, out of that first sermon, I got life without God will have no meaning. Without meaning, there's no purpose. Without purpose, suicide. And that's what we're seeing today is an epidemic of purposelessness. This materialism is left, they can't put words to it. These kids, they can't put words to it, but that's what it is. It's Solomon. It's just saying, you'll never have enough. And Pascal said it was a God-shaped hole, that God will fill it. But it really comes in the form of service. And your point and purpose in life will be helping others in whatever way that looks like. And we're pushing on the tour. We're gonna call it Tikkun Olam. I just like the saying of it. It's from the Jewish faith, Hebrew, that God knows He's made a broken world. He knows this, and He's charged the Jews with repairing it. So your Tikkun Olam is, what are you doing to heal the world?
Hmm.
What is your Tikkun Olam? What's your repair for the world? And I want to bring it to churches, and I want them to set up tables with community things that can be done, and the church start moving out of the church into the community, but in kind of a missionary point of way, rather than just being overtly about Jesus. Just be overtly about the task, and then let people come to you and ask, why are you doing this? I've been called to do it. Christianity is the only worldview that tells the strong they are obligated to reach back and pick up the weak. Every other worldview says crush them. You know, and it kills me because my kids have embraced that karma and the new age thing, and I have explained it to them that the caste system is the most brutal system there is,
Yeah.
because you see somebody living in their squalor and in their own waste, and you say, well, I can't help you because I'd be messing with your karma. You're paying the price for your past sins right now, and I got to let you pay them.
Hmm.
So it lets me off the hook. I don't have to help you. I can turn my back on you, and that's brutal.
Do you think that as you see, I bet you have a really interesting viewpoint of churches across the U.S. As somebody who travels so much and has been all over the country, do you find that people's response to serving God is different? Is it the same, or how is it regionalized? I mean, it feels like the South and the Midwest might be different than the East and the West, but I'm curious to get your perspective on how you think the church in America is doing. This may be an unfair question, just so you know.
Oh, it is. I don't know. I only know the church I go to,
Yeah.
and I just started there. We were at a church for about 15 years, and they changed pastors. Our senior pastor, just the founding pastor, was stepping down, and they brought in a young guy. Great story. He was a heroin addict when he came to church, and our pastor was a former heroin addict.
Hmm.
And so, what better? What a of all the churches in Tennessee that you could go to, this guy wanders into one that has a pastor that's a former heroin addict. So anyway, the
Yeah.
guy gets saved and then goes to seminary and works his way up, and they hand the pulpit over to him. And we're watching some Sunday online during COVID, and the new pastor says we need to get behind BLM and start using our resources to help.
Hmm.
And I looked at my wife and I said, that's the last check I write to this place.
Hmm.
I mean, is he even aware that they're a Marxist organization?
Right.
Their first order of business is to destroy the nuclear family. Is he even aware of that? I mean, or is it just this feel good thing, you know? And I said, I don't even care. He's either willfully ignorant or he's ignorant. I mean,
Yeah.
so anyway, that was it for me. And again, as far as forgiving him or whatever, you're entitled to whatever you want to preach from the pulpit, but I'm not going to support it with my money or God's money, you know, the way I look at it. So anyway, we were churchless for a while, and then it's very funny. We're I'm golfing, and they had planted a church in our little town,
Hmm.
a satellite church, and we had gone to it a couple times. It was at the middle school. It was just crowded. I mean, you know, so we just started watching online, and then because they were affiliated with the other one, we just stopped. So now I'm golfing in a scramble. This is such a God thing. And the guy I'm golfing with starts a conversation with the other two guys who we don't know. And he says, so where are you guys from? He goes, well, we live in Fairview, and I pastor a church there. And anyway, I hear him go, what church is that? And he says it, and I go, that's my church. Apparently, you're my pastor. And he had shades on. He had sleeves, tats, all up and down his arm, which he never preaches with short sleeves on.
Sure.
So I never knew he had sleeves. And anyway, he's got a hat. He's got shades on. So anyway, he pulls it all off. Like, oh my God, you're my pastor. So we spent 4 hours together. And I think it was not even a week later, my wife called me into the room on a Facebook video, and he made an announcement that they broke free from that other church,
Hmm.
and they gave them back all their seed money, and they are on their own now. And
Wow.
and they're building a new building, which turns out to be like 3 blocks from my house. So
Praise
I
God.
can walk to church for the first time and see God's preparing me for my old age, man. So anyway, it was so nice to get my checkbook out and write a check, and we have a home. It's called One Church Home now.
That's
So
awesome.
we do small group on Tuesdays at our house, which we've never done.
Yeah.
But I cannot speak to the state of church. I really can't. I do know I just read a book called Woke Jesus, and it's pretty frightening what's
Yeah.
going on at the institutions and the seminaries and the traditional Christianity has apparently been under assault
Sure.
for
Yeah.
quite
For a
some
long
time.
time.
I don't know anything about it. Again, it's funny. My manager will sometimes go, "You need to play dumb." I go, it's not a hard, it's not a stretch, you know.
I
And
I
again,
think
coming from a 12-step
yeah,
background
yeah,
where you allow everybody to speak their mind and you don't judge and you don't crosstalk, I've always felt that maybe church should be anonymous, like 12-step
yeah,
programs at the level of press, radio, and films. Lest you speak for the rest of us. And that's always been my concern. I have moments. I was just sharing the other night on stage in a club of all places. I don't know why I did, but I said I've had moments in my marriage that if they were ever on video, I would no longer have a career.
mm,
Just scenes. And I said, what happens is I say something to my wife that I'm ashamed of, and then the shame kicks in, and then the cycle starts, and then I'm gone. I'm not there
yeah,
anymore. And all the old tapes come back, and it runs 15 to 20 minutes or whatever it is. Just really psychotic stuff. I don't know. Tammy, she's heard it for years, so she just, I mean, she doesn't laugh, but she just steps aside and lets me wander around and rant and rave and punch my heavy bag and scream and holler at myself. And it's like I'm telling you, it's demonic. I can't come up with another word for it. But if the public witnessed it,
sure.
it would not be flattering. And you know, so to hold somebody to their testimony, um, again, I'm fortunate. I guess I don't ever judge people by their worst day. I don't.
Yeah,
I'm probably one of the few people that heard Alec Baldwin's conversation with his daughter and thought, "Yeah, I'm just glad some of mine haven't been recorded." It's
amen.
unfair for him that his daughter recorded it and put it out in public. It's unfair. Now, unless he does it every day and she's just tired of hearing it. I don't know, but church is church to me. It's a place to remind myself every week who's in charge of my life, and then it's interesting. We've been going to church for 20 plus years, but this is the first church we've been to where we're developing relationships with people.
Wow.
We've never done that. We were at a church once for about 4 years, and one day thousands of people are pouring out, and it hits me. I tell my wife, I go, point out somebody we know after 4 years. Nobody. Nobody. So small group became our introduction to getting to know people. We found a group of artists and their wives that were under the radar. So it was nice for Tammy because she was around women who husbands travel, and
Yeah,
and then I was able to talk about the road and some of the temptations that are out there. I'm usually good for 2 or 3 days, and then by day 4, my brain starts chirping to me and stuff. So it's just good to be with people that understand that.
I bet. I bet. I wanted to I wanted to read the very last page of the book. Some poetry that you wrote, and
Oh,
I'd love to get your thoughts on it. It's a beautiful. So it's such an interesting picture of who God is. Is that
well, I'll
in
tell you when
one
I wrote it too. It's interesting when I wrote it. So go ahead.
well in one moment you self profess that you've got demons, and in the next moment these words can come out of your heart, and they read like this: Who we were is not who we are. Today we choose to walk a different path. So feel free to throw at us the stones of our past. We will not deny them, but use them to humble us. And for today, our shield is the Lord. It is because of who He is and the blood that he shed, that we no longer have to run from our past, but can embrace it and walk with peace into the future.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I don't write poetry. You know where that came? I was probably a believer 2 months, and I'm watching a Promise Keepers thing on TV, and my notebook was next to me in the bed, and I wrote it down. I wrote it down as an individual. Who I am is not who I am. Who I was is not who I am today. I choose to walk. But for the book, I wrote it. I made it inclusive because the book is about us, but who we are. Yeah. And that was it. I've never written a poem since. I've been in Nashville for 25 years
I was going to
trying to write a
ask. I was
song.
going to ask.
I just want one song. One. Just get that mailbox money. You know? Can't do it. Can't
That
do
penny
it.
on
It's
that
like
stream,
God
you
said,
got it.
I depleted you. That's it, man. That's the one poem you're going to get. And
That's great.
my brother wrote one that I remember. Doesn't take words from another man's mouth to tell the world and make it known. This man's a fool, and he did it on his own. Another fire glowing coldly on ice, a losing combination like tossing loaded dice. And in the end, who is lost? The man who borrows time, unprepared to pay the cost.
Wow.
And I've never forgotten that. And my brother wrote that way back when he was in rehabs. And my brother was a brilliant poet, and just life was destroyed by crack and alcohol. And sad, he passed away a couple years ago. And I got so lucky. He was in the hospital, and I was home for a couple days. And Tammy says, "You need to go see your brother." I go, "Babe, it's an 8-hour drive." You know, she says, "You need to go see your brother." And I drove up there and spent a day with him. And then 2 days later, he passed away.
Wow.
So I was, you know, it's another one of those God things that, you know, doing for you what you cannot do for yourself, you know, and sending in that angel, you know, go, you know, get going. But I don't want to.
That's good, man. Okay, I have one more question for you, but
Right.
before I ask it, I know that all my podcast family are going to want to figure out how they can hook up with you on tour and pick up a copy of the book and learn more about your comedy, or even have you come out to one of their corporate events or one of their churches. Where's the best place to learn all things Jeff Allen?
JeffAllenComedy.com. As all the links are on there for social media and the book. JeffAllen.com years ago was a porn site portal, so don't go to JeffAllen.com. I haven't been back, so I don't know if somebody else bought it. There's a singer named Jeff Allen, so I don't know if he spent the money. They wanted like, I don't know, $30,000 for me to use my name, you know, but I wasn't. Now I could probably legally get it, but anyway, JeffAllenComedy.com. You've been warned, by the way. If your wife catches you on JeffAllen.com, don't blame me.
Nope. I found
looking for the
JeffAllenComedy.com. No problem.
I'm just looking for the comedian. He was a funny guy. Yeah, the tours. Boy, we're hitting the ground running. The book comes out, and then we're hitting the ground running on Are We There Yet tour.
Yeah.
And I don't quite know what that show is going to look like. I know the first half. I said I wanted to do straight stand up, just get them laughing hard, and then let them take a break, and then come back, and then we'll hit them with all that good stuff.
Whatever God
I tell
wants.
audiences, you know, if you can get through the first 6 chapters of the book without killing yourself, it's actually an uplifting tale. You know?
Oh, that's a great segue into my last question. It's an advice question. I ask you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the season of life that you're in.
Okay.
And so I want to take you back to the day before you married Tammy. If you could pull up a chair in front of that younger version of yourself, that young man, sit knee to knee with him, hold his hands, and look him in the eyes. Now, with all the wisdom and the life that you've experienced, what's the one thing you're going to tell yourself?
Quit drinking and embrace Jesus. And go to work. You got a lot of work to do.
Amen.
but God's grace will get you through it. Yeah. If I was talking to a child, yeah, I would say you're going to embark on a journey that's going to be at times exhilarating, at times gut wrenching, at times, but at every step you'll know you're alive. This is what life is. Somebody once said that as children we gather up things and throw them on a big bag on our back, and we carry that bag with us into our adult life. Now, the lucky ones spend their entire adult life emptying the bag. And it gets lighter. The load gets lighter the more you empty. But I wanted to call the book An Examined Life, based on I think it was Aristotle said an unexamined life is not worth living. But that's really what it was. It was just you become so self-centered early in recovery because it is all about you. I mean, it's like every little thing. I describe my early version of myself in recovery was that I was just a big scab, huge scab, and everything said to me or done, anyway, it would pick at some part of that scab, and some kind of pus would ooze out in the form of anger or really just biting sarcasm, and gradually those scabs got a little smaller and smaller. There's still a scab there, and it still gets picked at, but I'm a lot more patient than I ever was. And a perfect example of my newfound patience, we had 4 grandkids with us for 2 weeks. And at one point, I was sitting in my chair reading a book, and all 4 of them were just running laps around the kitchen and the living room, just chasing each other. And I'm just reading the book, and Tammy walks by, and I look at her. She's just smiling. She goes, "Wow, how different life would have been if you were like this with our 2." I go, "Yeah. I have said to my boys 1,000 times, I am so sorry. Can't fix it, And so, yeah, I would tell that young guy, patience is a virtue, and embrace Jesus. He is real. He's alive, and he's real, and the Holy Spirit will come and counsel, And I know that. I don't know if you have time.
Yeah.
The day after I accepted Christ as the Lord of my life, I had my kids with me, and I was introduced to Playboy at probably 10 years old. I think my father caught me looking at it, and I tried to hide it, and he goes, "Oh, that's why I bought it. I wanted you to learn about women." So from 10 on, Playboy was part of my life. When I got old enough to buy my own, I'd just go in and buy my own. And then even after I was married, I think Tammy got me a subscription for Christmas one year. I mean, that's where we were at as a husband and wife.
Yeah. Sure.
So anyway, I say, "Jesus, I'm yours." So the next day, I'm with the kids, and I'm at a gas station, and we're getting gas, and I'm getting snacks out of the thing, and I see the new Playboy came out. So I go, "Oh, I'll get the new Playboy." And this little voice says to me, "This is wrong." First time in my life, I have a crisis of conscience over the magazine.
Wow.
I end up in the back of the store trying to figure out what is going on with me that I can't buy this magazine. And then it dawns on me, that verse, "Don't worry about this life. I'll send a counselor in the form of the Holy Spirit." This is the new counselor. This is the new conscience. And I walked out shaking my head, going, I got to be able to buy Playboy. For the articles, at least, there's a lot of wisdom in that. But that's, again, it's not, I don't know, churches don't want to hear that, but that's kind of what God used to remind me of who I was and now who I am. This is the new, and this is going to be, there'll be many of these moments where you used to react and be this way, and now this voice will say, "You got to go make amends. You have to, And so, and the other one was when the car broke down. this is not my road to this is my road to Damascus moment. The car breaks down, and for I always loved, hated things like this because it gave me permission to be angry, which I loved. I was always angry anyway, so at least now I had a righteous reason to be angry. Who can be happy when their car breaks down?
Sure.
Anyway, I start to think, and I stopped, and I went to my son. Oh, there was a gas station about a mile back. Let's go back and get it. And Tammy looked at me and said, "That's it?" And I said, "I don't know why it just dawned on me. Mechanics pray too, And so I had this image of a mechanic on his knees going, I need rent money, Lord. I need work. And so that's how things work. He prays, and my car breaks down, and it's my turn to donate to the mechanics, and then maybe they come out and see one of my comedy shows. I don't know, but again, it's not my universe, and that was enough for me. But it was profound for me because of that verse. I will send a counselor. So when I step out of the bounds of the counselor is when my life gets miserable. When I deny that voice inside of me that says this is wrong. Tammy and I have a 3 rule. We've tried to buy things, and sometimes we start manipulating the system so we can get them. And every time we've done that, it ended badly, really badly. So if we need to make a major purchase and it gets blocked 3 times, we just go, God doesn't want us to have this, and we'll just wait. I mean, we try not to force our way into our worldview. I love people. God told me that I need to, slap you. I go, I don't think he said that. I think you want to slap me. I think you did. I don't think, not my Lord. He wouldn't.
That's so good. Jeff, this has been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and your generosity of time today. And man, I really hope that a lot of the people listening today get out on tour and get to see.
Oh, I hope so too.
The joy of the Lord that you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, man, the shows, I'm having a blast. The audiences that are coming are just a really mix of millennials and old people, and these young guys that open for me, man. They initially make fun of my audience because they're old, and then they realize they go, and the wait staffs, God bless my audience. They love my audience. There's no fist fights,
Right.
It's just, and the more people come out, the club owners just are so complimentary of the people. They're polite. They wait. There's no complaints really, and they eat. Lord knows they eat.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, I had the first one I ever did. I reached out, and the guy calls me. He goes, "You didn't tell me these people eat. I'm out of pizza dough. I'm out of chicken tenders." Well, if you didn't just cater to drunks, and cater to everybody, you'd know how much food you should keep on hand. So,
I love it. Well, hey, I appreciate the time today, man.
Thank you, man.